Welcome. I'm Sue Landay. We have our show and share today where we're have featuring Martin Galpin from DeckHive. Martin is based in the UK. He's just outside of Oxford. He's an occupational psychologist, and he's one of the creators of At My Best tools, which are a couple of card decks. And during COVID, there it is. Thank you. During COVID, he took some time to develop an online tool to be able to share decks with participants. And I was just have been really impressed with that tool. He has dozens of decks on it. One of our Unzip It decks is part of that ensemble. But I'd like him to kind of share that with you and tell us all about it. So, Martin, take it away.
Thanks, Sue. It's yeah, really kind of you to invite me to come and show and share. So just to give you some backstory, as Sue said, we had our own card decks, yeah, my best decks we created a few years ago, and they're used a lot by coaches and by trainers. And at the early days of the pandemic, we had a lot of people getting in touch and saying, "Help! What do I do now? Because I use your card decks all the time." And now suddenly the world has changed, and I'm having to work with people remotely, and I don't quite know how to do that. So we created a very rough prototype very quickly to better use the cards on screen and got really good feedback with that. So we evolved that further. And as we did that, we got a lot of interest from other people who created card decks who liked what we'd done and wanted to do something similar. So we evolved the idea further and came up with the concept of DeckHive, which is a platform that hosts a number of different card decks in the same place. So as a user, you have the ability to use multiple card decks, not at the same time right now, unfortunately, but you can go to the same tool, the same platform to use different card decks with your clients in your interactive real-time sessions. So I'll just start screen sharing and then I can just give you a bit of a show around the site. And then obviously you can have a play with that in your own time afterwards. I know that Sue will have the link to share with you
Yes.
after the session or during the session. So, can you see my screen here?
Yep, all
The
good.
DeckHive screen, excellent. So, yeah, as Sue says, we have multiple decks on here now, and it's been growing steadily. So we now have about 40. I think there are 40 decks, in fact, in our library. So you can click on any of these particular decks. So, for example, Art of the Possible here, and you'll see a bit more information about the deck, often with a little video that will give you an intro from the creator of that deck about what it is designed for and how you can use it. And sometimes some suggestions about exercises you can use that card deck with, or some downloads that might be helpful. So you can browse that library and find your way around it. And as I said, there's 40 decks in there now. In fact, there's more than 40 because some of these are also available in different languages. So if you go to the top of the library here, you can see we've got the English decks showing, but you can see all these other languages that we have. Some of them we don't have very many decks, but if we look at Spanish, for example, and for those of you who are working in Spain, you'll see there are a few decks in here. Some of them are picture decks. So Pathways deck, for example, is just a picture deck, so that can be used in any language. And some of these other ones have been created in the Spanish language. So that's always an option for you if that's of interest. In addition to the library that we've been curating here from different creators, you have the option to also create your own deck. So if you're one of these creative trainers who loves to take inspiration from the variety of tools that you've used over the years, or you need to create something for a particular client or a project, then there's also the option within the system to create your own deck. It's really easy to do, to create something really simple, or you can create something more elaborate if you like, but that would require kind of your skills on Canva or those kind of platforms to create something pretty. And with any of the card decks that are in here, the intention of the DeckHive platform is to use them in an interactive way in a real-time session with your audience. And I'll show you now how that can work. So for any session we create, we can save the sessions so we can go back to them at another time, which is clearly something that's useful and an advantage of the technology over a physical set of cards. And in my dashboard here, you'll see I've got various different decks at the top, which are the decks that I've created recently. I've also got my favorited decks that I use a lot. And then underneath here, I've got my sessions that I've run previously. So we've got the Trainers Warehouse show and share. I'll open that session now. And this is one I've set up previously. Now, there's not much in it at the moment, but this is what you see when you start a new session. It's a blank table. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Unzip It Team Dynamics deck. So we can click on that and open the deck and then scroll through and see all the different cards. We could also use the flip all icon, top left there, you see that? Click on that and it turns all the cards over. So equally, we could use that if you want to choose a random card and just simply drag it over onto the table. So it's as simple as that. We also have a sticky note here.
When you drag it over, does it disappear from the left-hand side or does it reside in both places?
Both places, yeah. So so if we've got a session with multiple people on it, they can all choose the same card if they want to. So that's, again, one of the advantages of a digital version is that you don't have to have 50 sets of them in this space. You know, you can have 50 people in the room, they can all choose the same card if they wish. So yes, good point. You need to be aware of that because it's
Let
maybe
me
sometimes
also just let others know that if you have questions while Martin's speaking, this is always kind of an informal back and forth. So please either type your question in chat or unmute yourself and ask. So, but yeah, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
please do. And do let me know if something appears in the chat because for some reason I've managed to lose
That's
the
okay.
chat from my screen. So
I'll keep you posted. I'll
thank
keep
you.
an eye on it.
I am terrible at keeping an eye on that at the same time, even if I can see it. So there we have the cards, but we also have the sticky notes, so we can just drag one of those over onto the table too. So we can add comments, double click on that, and then we can type whatever we like into there. And we can change the size of our sticky note to suit. We can hover over and then click on a different color, change the font, justification, and so on. So just like, any other kind of whiteboard technology, but this is deliberately really simple. So one of the things I've heard from a lot of trainers over the last couple of years is the complexity of whiteboard sometimes puts people off. So they can do amazing things, obviously, but from your delegate's point of view, sometimes it gets in the way. The functionality might not be what you're trying to focus on. So we've kept this as simple as possible. So you can close the deck back down so you've got more space and you can obviously move the cards around and so on. I'll show you a couple of other features quickly and then
you can turn it over from here also, right?
absolutely, yeah. I'll show you a few more features in here and then what we do is get people in so they can play themselves and
Okay, great.
experience it. I think that's probably the best way.
Okay.
So yeah, so absolutely you can, with any card that's on the table here, we can flip it over, we can duplicate it, we can delete it, or we can magnify it. Now, if we magnify it, everybody who's in the session will see it enlarged, just like I do. So that's a good way to add emphasis as we're discussing or debriefing an exercise that we've done.
Okay.
But we can also zoom in and out like you can on other tools. So I'm just using my wheel on my mouse to do this here. But this is just local to me. So this is the view that I'm seeing of the table, if you like. So I often try and think of the table as a separate entity, and then I'm looking through the window of my screen at that table. So I'm zooming in and out with my window now so I can see things enlarged. If you're in a session with me as a participant, you just see it the same as it was for you. Now, that's an important point as a trainer to be aware of because what it means is that I can drag across, to a different part of this table, and I could not see the content that's on the table because I'm looking at the wrong part of the table. So sometimes you will find people say to you, I can't see the card you're talking about. That's probably because they're looking at a different part of the table. So we all start in the same place, but sometimes people kind of move around. So usually the best solution to that is to zoom out and then they'll be able to see where the cards are. And if you hover your cursor over the content that you want to go to and zoom in, it will zoom into that focal point. So that's kind of a handy tip. One of my favorite features within the system is the numbers at the bottom here, where we've got different tables. So we can create different spaces for people to work in. Now, sometimes that's going to be useful for saying do a different activity on another table with the same card deck, because we can only have one card deck in a session. So that's a limitation that we have at the moment. So you'd have to use different sessions if you wanted to have different card decks for different activities. But it's particularly useful, this feature, for breakout groups. So sometimes if we're in a large session, we've done this for fairly frequently, kind of over 50 people, sometimes 100 people, or even 200. It starts to get a bit messy when you get that number of people just from crowd control point of view. Technically, there's nothing stopping you do that. But very frequently with kind of 10, 20, 30 people. And what's useful to do then is to give people different spaces to work in, because if we have 30 of us all in this on the same table and we're all choosing 5 cards each, you can imagine how that's going to get a big mess pretty quickly. It's fine if we're just choosing 1 card each, maybe. But if we're doing a different activity that requires multiple cards, it's not so clever. So what we can do is, as a host of a session, click on the plus and it adds new tables to the session. We can go up to about 15 tables in a session, and that without a problem. Screen size is where we start to hit limits. And there's no automatic way of assigning people to different tables. So it's not like if they're in Zoom breakout room 3 that they're automatically going to see table 3. So we have to tell people where to go. So we'll do that in a moment. Depending on the numbers, we'll put people into breakout groups and you can do the same thing. So I would normally say if you're in breakout room 3 in Zoom, then click on the number 3 at the bottom. That's your space to work in. That makes sense?
Great.
So on table 2 here, I've already put some of the Team Dynamics cards. So sometimes the way we like to use this is to let people free select, as I just showed you from the deck. So you open the deck and they drag them across and make their choices. Other times we don't need to do that. We just maybe come up with a subset of the cards in the first place. We could turn them all upside down like we've done here. And then we can get people to come into the session and just choose a card at random by flipping it over and have a discussion around that question. So they're still engaged, they're interactive, but it's really simple. So there's less to go wrong. It takes less time to engage people with that. But it makes it a bit more engaging, a bit more fun than it would be if we just posed a question or showed it on a PowerPoint slide. So that's a really simple way to use it. But you can imagine, the idea for us is to, as best we can, replicate what you would do in a training room so that you have that flexibility to use the card decks in
Yeah, I sent it
creative
back though.
ways.
I
So
didn't like it. What I had.
I hope you'll find different ways to use it. Sorry, is there a question?
No, I think someone needed to unmute or needed to mute, and they did. So can we give it a whirl?
We can, yeah. So well, I'll show you how I invite you to a session and how I start a session. But before I do that, just quickly, I'll show you 2 other things. One is this hand at the top there. So as a facilitator, you can click on that and freeze the session, which means nobody else can kind of
No
interact.
touching?
No touching. So you know what it's like in the training room, don't you? As soon as you get the card decks out, everyone stops listening to you and starts playing. So sometimes you might want them to stop playing so you can clarify exactly what you want them to do with the cards. So that's why that's there. And at the bottom, there's a camera icon, which allows any participant in the session to take a screenshot of the whole table. So that's a really good way of getting
For the
people to
church.
take away their content
Okay, yeah,
they've
look
been
at it and
interacting
see.
with. So
Yeah.
that's there. And then these ones do kind of recenter and reset the zoom. So that's really simple.
Mhm.
Well, I'll leave the session now and just start another one so you can see how easy that is to do.
Okay.
So if I go to, I'm going to go to the strengths cards here, start a new session. It just loads that up. It starts in a draft mode. So I can set everything up before I activate the session. And when I activate the session, I just need to save it first. So I'll give that some random name. And then I'll activate the session, which will get rid of the draft session wallpaper. And that will then create these icons here for the sharing. So if I click on this one here, it creates the share link. It's really important that you know that this is the link. This is a way to share the link.
Okay.
If I just share the link that's in my browser at the top there, that won't work. People won't get in the session. So you need to create the share link to do that. So click to copy that to the clipboard. And then all we do then is go to the chat and paste that in. So it does require me to find the chat again. So let me see if I can do that. Here we are. So there you go. So the link is there. So you'll see if you just click on that and you go to join. Generally works best for people to join from a computer rather than a phone or an iPad. Touchscreens don't work brilliantly at the moment. They're okay, but it's not ideal. So it's a bit distracting from what you're trying to do usually. So I would normally ask people in advance if they can join on the computer. That'd be good. Obviously, a phone has very limited screen space, so it doesn't work so well from that perspective. So I can see how many of you are joining the session. Now, what I would normally do, and I probably should do again here now, is stop sharing my screen, because what happens is you'll be joining the session in your own browser. But if I'm still sharing my view of the browser through the screen share on Zoom, then you've got two versions of the same thing. And then what you'll find is that people will say, I'm trying to move the cards, but nothing's happening. I can't move them. And that's probably because they're looking at my screen, not their own. Does that make sense? So if I stop sharing, then I
So
will know.
except that before, I was gonna just say, before you do, because I'm recording the session,
Yeah.
I won't be able to capture any of that.
Okay.
So if it's
No.
okay with the group and you can make sure you're on your own screen, I'd love to be able to capture that.
Good point. So I've
Yeah.
shared again. So you can see there's the number of people on the session. there's 9 of us who are in the session here now. So what I'm going to do, do we want to just do all this together, or should we go into breakout groups? What do you prefer, Sue? Is it time-wise, it's sensible to stay in here together?
I was gonna say together, but can people show me a lot of you aren't showing your faces, but if you can, either with thumbs up or an emoji or something, let me know if you have any. Yeah, let's
Martin,
stay
can I ask you a
together.
quick question?
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead, Jed.
You said that you have that you can see how many. Oh, I just found it. There are 9 people in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gotcha. I
so
wasn't
you
seeing where that was.
yeah, I think I can't remember if you see that as a participant in the session. You possibly
Oh, so
don't.
you're right. I'm seeing your. That's why I couldn't find it, because I see it on your
See it on his
screen.
screen.
All right,
Yeah.
delete your
Yeah.
screen out of here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on
And
my
also,
screen as a participant, I don't know how many people are sharing.
no.
You only do as the
That's right. Yeah.
master or whatever you are.
Yeah, as a host, I can click on that icon as well, and it will show me who is in the session. So if you've entered your name when you join, I can see that list in here as well. I can also lock the session so others can't join. It's rarely an issue, obviously, because we're sharing the link in a private space anyway. So feel free to kind of open the deck, scroll through.
No,
You
I'm
might want
sorry. One other thing, Martin, Melody is saying that none of the buttons at the top are visible. Is that as designed for the participants?
Yeah, so as participants, you don't need those controls. They're host controls. The same you'll see at the bottom. I've got a plus sign to add more tables, which I'll do again now. But you as a participant will only see the numbers of the tables that exist.
Yeah.
Likewise, I can click on the number of the active table, and I can choose to delete the whole table, clear the table of all contents, those kind of things. And as a participant, you can't do that either.
Great.
So I can see some of you adding some cards. You might want to flip over all the cards too, look at the photographs. So an activity we do with these cards very often might be to say, choose a picture which reminds you of a time that you've been at your best. So if you think about kind of the story of some of your greatest successes, which are the images that kind of conjure that memory for you. And then people can have the conversation, because it's all with card decks, of course, it's always about the conversation, isn't it? And my most satisfying times of using DeckHive is when people don't even notice the platform. They're just engaging in the cards and they're engaging in the conversation, and the technology is kind of in the background. So for me, that's a sign of success, is when we don't have to talk about it. But very often, it's helpful to show people beforehand so they get a sense of what to do, like you have done here today. But to be honest, if a group, we know if they're fairly IT savvy, we can sometimes just share the link and say, this is what we want you to do, get on with it, and people figure it out for themselves. So
Mhm.
I can see there's some other comments in the chat, are there?
Yeah, and so it looks like, thank you, people are playing with it and moving around a series of words that they may identify with, finding a picture. And, as you facilitate with any deck, there are so many uses and applications. Would it be helpful for Martin to share any of those ways that he likes to use it, or for anyone in the group to talk about how they might like to use it or ask questions?
I have one question is, the cards appears in a certain order, or you can shuffle randomly?
At the moment, they're just in a certain order. So when we set up a new card deck, we decide the order of that. So the creator of that deck normally does that. So if you're creating your own deck, obviously you can decide the order you want them to appear and whether you want in this case, the images to be on the top or you want the words to be on the top. So you can decide all of that. But once the deck is created, you as a user don't have any control over the way that deck appears right now. That might be something that in time we can add as a feature, but right now it is simple. So it's a set order, yeah. So the way we get around that sometimes is if we want to direct people to maybe a subset of the cards or something like that, we would just normally pull those cards onto the table in advance of the session, save that session. We can do that, well ahead of time before we activate it. And then we just, through the instructions we give people, say, you'll see some cards on the table, we don't even tell them about opening the deck. So that's a way to work around it, if you like.
Yeah, and I love, so as soon as you start a new table, you have the whole deck at, accessible on your left. And you can bring in breakout groups together who could, write their post-its, have a conversation, talk about either sides of this card. I love your strengths deck also, it's for EQ, for teaming, for icebreakers. There's so much. I love both the interface and the content.
Yeah, thank you. And it's it's nice with this deck. Obviously, we know it well because it's ours. So some of the ways that we tend to use this, as I said before, choose a picture that reminds you of a time you've been at your best. Have those conversations. Do that in a breakout group. That works nicely. And sometimes we build from that to say, having chosen that picture and told your partner in your breakout group, go through the word side of the cards and see if you can identify 5 or 6 strengths that have come through that story of that time when you were at your best, and then take a screenshot so you capture that feedback you've had about the strengths that other people have recognized in your story. So that kind of works really nicely and builds a kind of takeaway for people. Sometimes I put the instructions where you have kind of a step-by-step kind of activity. Sometimes I'll pre-prepare a session and put the instructions on sticky notes on the screen so that then people can have that reminder to go back to it.
Would you
Another thing that
also
I find,
have people...
sorry,
go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
But it's just a sort of small point, but one I found really helpful when I kind of realized it was sensible. I quite like to have the first table, which is number 1 here now. I rename it something else. And I use that as my kind of welcome page that allows people to just make a mess and use the cards and play and test it before we do the activity. The reason that it's good to have a separate table for that at the front is that that's where everybody will arrive into the session. If I don't do that, then the poor group who are in breakout room 1 in Zoom are going to have like mess all over their space that everyone else has put there. And so it just helps to kind of keep things a little bit tidy. It's a small thing, but it helps. Sorry, Sue.
No, I was going to ask if you, I see that when you hover over something, you see people's names. Do you recommend that they put their names? So that was one question. And then I see a whole bunch of other questions, both in the chat and on the first table. So,
yep.
So let's address those kind of.
Yeah, so I would normally let people or encourage people to put their names in, but it depends on the activity. So it's as you'd have seen, it was optional for doing that. So it just depends on the nature of your session. So the only time people really see it is when someone's moving a card, so their name pops up as they're moving it. You'll have seen that now. But it doesn't show who's chosen any particular cards after they've dropped them. So it doesn't really sort of keep anything permanent, if you like, at the moment at least.
Okay. Let's take a couple of these questions. So Carmen asks, when you get access to the platform, do you have access to all the decks available on the platform?
Yes, you do. That's how we've designed it at the moment, at least. One day that might change. I think there are pros and cons as the library grows. So yeah, if you're a subscriber, you get access to all 40 decks, and if we add more, then you'll get access to those too, and you can create your own, as I say, on top of that. So that's the way it works. The limitation around the plans with the subscription plans we have is around the number of activated sessions you have. So that's really the only differentiator. So you can have up to 5 activated sessions in a month on the starter plan, or you can have an unlimited number on the unlimited plan. It's as simple as that.
And Carmen also asks, are there training or instructions from the card deck developers about the best way to use their decks?
Yeah, so for most decks there are. It varies according to how much information the creator has given us. But if you remember right at the start when I went through the library and you click on a deck, that's where you then find all the information. So sometimes there's a video that the creator has put together that shows you the deck and tells you about why and how they created it. And often there'll be examples of different activities you can use that deck for as well. So so that's all there for you to go and explore in the library, and you can easily access that.
Okay, and then a few notes that I realize everybody can read right there on the table, and some feedback, beautiful photos and thought-provoking. Nice from Jim. I can see using this deck to touch base on a perceived strength, and everyone pulls a card, then posts it. And then discussing why they chose the card. I love that suggestion. And I think, Judd, this was you could be useful to flip to show the images and have people pick the image they see if they agree with the feeling depicted. So sort of tying together the feeling, the emotion, and or the strength along with the image, whether it reflects it or not. Did I capture that your thought correctly?
That wasn't me. And where are you
Oh,
seeing?
sorry.
It's okay, but where are you seeing the names? Because I don't see the
I
names in it.
thought that when someone was moving it, it came up, but
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it
see
shows you.
Martin
wrong.
Gall-
Yeah,
I
so it
see
shows you
Martin is
who.
moving that
Yeah.
right now.
That's right.
Okay, so I it's only when they move the card, that's where I saw it. Okay,
Yeah. So
thanks for that clarification.
but yeah, in terms of that point, the exercises you do with it, it's kind of up to you to, whatever fits the session you're trying to run and the points you're wanting to make, then you have that facility to kind of make it interactive for people to engage them in a different way. My recommendation would be to start simple, build your confidence in the
Mhm.
platform. The last thing you want to be doing is worrying about how do you use this, how do you communicate to your audience, how they need to use it. So practice, test it out with friends and family just to kind of play with it, get comfortable with the basic facilities within the system, and then start easy and start simple, and build from there as you kind of know that and trust that your audience will get it and know what you want to do.
And I think that Sarah had, I don't know who had the question, on a yellow sticky note. Can you see that there are cards on, can the facilitator identify if there's been anything placed on tables 2, 3, or 4? Is there any indication of that? Or do you just kind of need to hop around?
You need to hop around. So yeah, it's a
Okay.
really good idea, and it would be a useful feature to have. But now, no, it just requires us to click on the different tables, and then we can. It helps if I'm zoomed out.
DeckHive version 2.
Might be version 5 or something. Yeah.
Or version, exactly.
Yeah, and one of the lovely things about something like this, people have got some great ideas. The challenge is just kind of having the ability to kind of pick out which are the right ones to take forward at the right time, and obviously having the money to do that, because these things are not cheap to develop, as you can imagine. But what we don't want to do is kind of keep adding so many features that it becomes like the things we were trying not to be. So keeping it simple has some benefits as well, I think.
Got
And
it.
as a participant, I only see 1 and 4 right now. I don't see 2 and 3.
Do you not know?
Is that a problem that I have, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that. That's interesting. Could try refreshing your screen maybe and see what happens, but I'm surprised. I've not ever known that issue before, but it could have been because I added them very quickly, potentially. But no, but as a participant, you should see all
Now
4.
I can see them. Now they're there. When I refreshed, I could see them.
Yeah.
And Holly, to
Yeah.
answer your question, you're not seeing on your screen the way to add another table, but if you were to toggle back to the Zoom screen share, you'll see that there's a plus on the bottom of the facilitator's screen to be able to add another table. And I'm being sensitive to time, so at 12:30, I want to just take a moment to say thank you, Martin, for this amazing tool, and to everyone who's participating. We'd be happy to stay on for a few more minutes in case there are any other questions or observations or discussion that we'd like to have. But in the interest of time, I do want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
And any more questions, feel free. We'll be here.
Okay, thank you. One question is, if I create one table, I can duplicate the same structure of the table
Yeah, good thinking. Yes, you can. So it helps to
for
plan
using
ahead.
in
If that's-
breakout rooms or something.
Yeah, so yeah, if you want to do that sort of laying out sticky notes beforehand with instructions, or you want to lay out some cards, yeah, you can get one the way you want it to be, and then create your tables as duplicates of that. So, for example, if I click as the host on the number 1 at the bottom there, I can see I can delete the table, duplicate table, rename it, or clear it. So if I click
Okay.
on duplicate, I think it will be table 5. Yeah, so table 5 now is a copy of what
That's
table 1
great.
was.
Oh, that's great.
And
you.
Sarah put in the chat earlier the link to access DeckHive, and if we do have a promo code for Trainers Warehouse, that's TW25, that will get you 25% discount off of up to a year of subscription. So feel free to make use of that as well.
Yeah, and everyone has a 30-day free trial at the start as well, so it's hopefully enough time for you to kind of have a proper play and test it out and see whether it kind of works for you and the kind of sessions that you run.
Yeah. I have another question. If I upload or create my own card deck, it will be available for the rest of the users, or it's just for my profile?
Just for you, yeah, it's a good point. I didn't make that point. It's a private deck, so it would only be available to you in your on your dashboard. Obviously, if it's a deck that you have available elsewhere, you think there is a wider audience for it, then we can talk about that, potentially about adding it. But for most people, their private decks are kept private. One sort of additional point around that, though, is for corporate plans, which we have a facility for, would be that if you're on a corporate plan, for example, with 10 users, then you can, with one click, share your private deck with those 10 users, so they can all then run the same sessions as you with that private content. So we've tried to make that kind of process easy as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. Any other questions?
All right. Martin, thank you. Thank you for being here with us all the way from the UK. And thanks everyone for participating. This was great to see this demo. Again, I love the tool and your decks, and hope folks can make great use of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you very
everyone.
much. Bye.
Bye.